Yeah, that's fine. One of the best places to start about JavaScript is I have a repo on GitHub, HTML and CSS. And so you can look at that repo, and then I have a file down here, Greater Commons, a folder down here, Greater Commons. And so this is what this page looks like, and you've seen it before, I think. I just recently refactored it. I don't like that. I got to bring that down. My styling's off on this. I don't know what the heck happened there. But this is JavaScript. That text changing. Okay. So JavaScript is client-side functionality. It's a language you use on the browser to have interactivity on your web page, and then also to do things like one of the ways that you could do some initial validation of a form or assist a client, a user, in filling things out correctly. It's not validation you could rely upon when you the reason this looks crappy, I just realized, is because the resolution on this screen is crappy. So it looked good when I had high resolution. But so you can't rely on JavaScript to validate your data, because a client could turn off the JavaScript, or they could write their own JavaScript to do something completely opposite. However, JavaScript can assist the client in knowing things more quickly. So instead of having to round trip to the server and get a response back, oh, your passwords didn't match, with the re-enter the password thing, JavaScript can check that and tell the client. So, okay, that's cool, because it's giving an answer to the client quicker without having to go to the server and back, makes your app faster. So that JavaScript right there, this is one of my favorite things about JavaScript, is Query Selector. And instead of Query Selector, like when I originally did this project, it was get element by ID. So you'll see document get element by ID. I think there's a document get element by class. I don't know. I'm not a big, strong JavaScript person, right? But that's like one of the backbone things you're going to use when doing web stuff. And so HTML is made up of elements or tags. And we call that the document object model, right? So the DOM, the document object model. It's a model of the objects in your document, right? So this is my document. I have a section object, I have a main object, I have a header object. It's a model of the objects in your document. It's a model that's a hierarchical tree, because everything starts out with the root, which is your HTML node, right? It starts out with the root, and then things are nested under that. So nested under HTML is the head and the body, right? And then nested under the body is header and a bunch of other tags. So I've showed you this before. DOM. Right? Document, root element, HTML, head, body. This is the document object model. Well, if you want to start changing things on a web page or interacting with things on a web page, you need to be able to target things on this model and say, that element right there, when they click it, do this, right? And so the way you do that is with, like, in the old days, document get element by ID. And the new way, and you see people all the time still using get element by ID, but document query selector. And query selector allows you to put in CSS stuff like a class name. So I'm selecting a class here. Or an ID. I'm selecting an ID here. Which one am I selecting? So here I have a class slug. Right? So this class slug right there, that's that main text on the page. Greater Commons lets you collect, share, and discover. Greater Commons lets you collect, share, and discover. So in my JavaScript, I said, hey, document, and then query selector, and I pass in this class slug, and I assign that to the variable x. So I have now selected this element in the DOM, and I've assigned it to a variable x, which means I could do things with that variable x, like x enter HTML, and I could set it to nothing, and then x style max width, and I could change a property about that object in the document. And I'm doing this all programmatically on the client. X enter HTML is equal to that plus, this other stuff. So I've selected that one place, that main text, and then I do a document query selector, and I select create, become, and find. Create, become, and find. So those are these things here: create, become, and find. Right? I've selected those, and so now I've selected them, and I've added an event listener. So document query selector, not assigning it to a variable, just saying, hey, that object in the DOM, add an event listener to it, and the event listener I want to add is mouse over, and when that occurs, when that event occurs, listen for that event, and when it occurs, run this function, mouse over. And so now it's going to run mouse over whenever I mouse over that element in the DOM. And so when I mouse over this element in the DOM, and that first one is create, so when I mouse over it, it runs that function and does this code. So it takes x, which was where the text is, sets it to nothing, changes the max width, and then changes the enter HTML, the text, to this, right? Create a collection of resources. Create a collection of resources. And then I also have another one for create, which is add event listener, mouse out. So when my mouse leaves that DOM element, run mouse out. And what does mouse out do? Mouse out says, again, set that text object in the DOM to nothing, change its width, and then put this text back in it. Right? So mouse over puts that text in, mouse out puts the original text back in. And so that's all hinging upon being able to select elements in the DOM. And the way you do it with JavaScript is just document, query selector, and then a class name or a pound, an ID, right? And then you can start adding stuff to it. So that's kind of like one of the most fundamental things about JavaScript that for me is like, just from a rudimentary aspect, I got to totally know document query selector, and then to be able to write a couple of little functions. And you saw some of the syntax for JavaScript there. Function, mouse over, a name, no parameters or arguments being passed in, and then just a code block, and taking something and setting equal to something and ending all your lines with a semicolon. And these backslashes are escaping double quotes, so I could have double quotes showing. Right? That shows up on my page, double quotes right there. So that's a big deal with JavaScript. Trying to think about the next thing.
So JavaScript lets you basically edit the page pretty much however you want after the page has been delivered. So you can see how that might be useful for create a user account. You got the password and the confirm password. You can just have you just add an event listener on the trying to submit the form and have it just check before it submits. And that way, it doesn't have to go all the way to the server, or for the server to say, hey, these don't match, and then all the way back to you. So, again, on the web, speed is critical. You want people to use your website, you have to be fast. And JavaScript is a good way to do that. However, you don't want to go overboard. JavaScript's not secure whatsoever. You may say that they're not going to send, you may add that JavaScript and so it won't ever submit to your server with non-matching passwords. Your server still has to check to make sure they're not matching. They may have turned JavaScript off. They may have created an HTTP package and sent it manually without a web browser. So your server your server has to do all your security things. The user doesn't have access to the server, so you can be as secure as you want there. JavaScript, not secure. but it's good for making your website fast and responsive, which is what everyone wants when they're looking at their website. Yeah.
If the user has JavaScript disabled, none of that would happen.
Yeah, if you got JavaScript disabled, well, most websites will just not work out too well with JavaScript disabled. But yeah, quite a bit of stuff just doesn't work on the web without JavaScript. The best way to do things, if you can, is to make your website work fully without JavaScript and just be better if you've got JavaScript working. That way, if someone's trying to go secure-wise and have their JavaScript disabled, they can run without their JavaScript. They can do everything. They've got their JavaScript disabled. They had to manually turn that off. They obviously know what they're doing, and they can expect a slower web page. Whereas just a casual user just comes to your web page, they're going to have JavaScript, and you can have your JavaScript make it much faster for them.
And there's currently a movement by Google and Facebook to have way less JavaScript in web pages. So they have something called AMP, Accelerated Mobile Pages, which basically is just like no JavaScript from the developer in your website. Like some JavaScript can exist in, I think, a couple of web components that come from Google and things like that, but you can't create your own custom JavaScript and have it on your web page if you want things to be categorized as an AMP page. And so accelerated mobile pages is just Google trying to get mobile web to be as fast as native apps. And something that's key to that they found is, let's get rid of JavaScript. And a lot of development, the momentum in web development has been towards heavy use of JavaScript.
It's not needed for a lot of things. The website that Todd was just showing you with the on mouse over, on mouse out, it is possible to do that with just CSS, no JavaScript whatsoever.
Yeah, that'd be the better way.
It's tricky, but it'd be slightly trickier than the JavaScript way, but it would be the better way. CSS is way more secure. You can't have with JavaScript, you can have it go download a virus file and install it on the user's computer, in theory. Web browsers do have a few protections against that sort of thing, but for the most part, if you get a virus from online, it's from bad JavaScript that someone put on there, usually from an ad or something. So CSS does not have that problem. CSS is basically how you describe how your web page looks. It's like where Todd had the different font for that thing, that's from CSS. So with CSS, it is possible to do that thing. You can have a CSS thing that's on hover and have it change, and you'd have all three of those text things in the DOM already. Just have two of them set to hidden, not visible, unless this thing has your mouse over it. And so it's trickier to do with CSS. It's faster and more secure, though. And then all those folk who don't have your JavaScript still get a nice, pretty web page. But there are still some things that only JavaScript can do, which is why it's still around. So don't try to get away from JavaScript as much as you can. It's still useful.
Right.
Just saying, there are other alternatives for the vast majority of things that you may want to glance at first before deciding JavaScript's the best tool in your toolbox.
Yeah, it's kind of like beer. It's probably the first time in the history of humanity JavaScript's been compared to beer. You know, like a beer in the evening could help you relax. You overdo it, it does not help you. You have too many beers, you're in trouble. One beer, it's okay. And you know what? You should be able to function fine without any beers. You should just still be able to relax. You shouldn't have to need a beer. All right. Yeah, but like Angular or React, these are like super heavy JavaScript frameworks where in some ways they say to hell with HTML and CSS, let's just load a shell and then we're going to do everything, create elements from JavaScript, remove elements, and it'll just be like a singular page which, you know, all we're doing is JS. And so I've really leaned to
speed. They get some pretty decent speed and animations out of it, but
yeah, so there are some added bells and whistles that come with doing it that way, but like here's a website that I like, Long Bike Ride. I just like the design of it. You know, I think that's kind of cool. But if you look at how this website was made, whoops. Let's see what we have here. So here's style sheets. We have stuff like minimum pro, WP content. I'm not sure what that is. Version 301, some sort of like Bootstrap-esque thing, I imagine. And dash icons, minified, CSS, some other framework thing for icons. And then here's a font, Google Fonts. That's cool. I'm down with that. And simple social icons, fonts. So we're downloading a whole bunch of other fonts. And fancy box, CSS, long bike ride, plugins, easy fancy box, jQuery, plugins, Jetpack, CSS Jetpack, some other deal. And I don't know what all this stuff is, but there's a whole lot of code there that's being downloaded. And I'm not sure what all those dash icons are. Not too bad. Not too bad, right? But, you know, hey, maybe this was built at one of those like get a free site websites and it's all automated for you or whatever. But then I was like, you know, can we rebuild that site without downloading all that crap? And so this was like my exercise for my students yesterday, and here's the starting point I left them at. But it was LBR homage, right? Long bike ride homage. But here for the CSS, we have, 63 lines on this one. And then we have a couple of media queries, and this one's got, 38 lines. So that's if you're 500 pixels or less. And then if you're more than 500 pixels, 28 lines. And then just this. And, it's downloading appropriate sized images for the size of your display. And, we got pretty close for a fairly good starting point, with something coming up and sliding under. So obviously, and we put borders and things around so we could see where are the different objects and what are they doing, right? Like, okay, but cool, man. I really like the way that website functions. I think it's pretty neat. And now we've got a really cool starting point to start to build something. Obviously it needs a little bit of styling and things. But then when you go mobile too, we have a nice mobile experience with a cool menu down at the bottom. You've seen that before, But how can you just do it? And that's what I said. I'm like a fundamentalist, which is weird because my grandpa was a fundamentalist too, but for Christ. And but you should just know CSS and HTML and some JavaScript and server side and be able just to build it without some framework, which takes time to learn those frameworks anyhow and how they work. But you could just do it straight up, HTML, CSS, and a little JavaScript. There's no JavaScript in this. Anyhow, that's my little thing about not downloading too much material. So here's an example of JavaScript running a whole app. And there's no DOM in this, really. And it's the whack-a-president deal. You guys have seen this, right? I showed this to you?
Maybe not this class.
You haven't seen this? Which president would you like to whack? Wait, that didn't sound right. I didn't build this really well because it's not responding to, the intent of this wasn't to make it responsive to all different screen sizes, but to build something that's pure JS with no DOM in it when it starts. And it creates the HTML document object models and it destroys them as needed. So this page here will be completely destroyed. All of the DOM in it, all the HTML will be destroyed, and a whole new set of HTML will be created. We'll never leave this page. It's all being done with JavaScript. Who do you want to hear? George Bush, Obama. It's a joke, which is why I put in he was never president, nor was Kermit. And then there's Reagan, and then there's Bill Clinton. Raise your hand if you want a Bush. Raise your hand if you want Obama. Raise your hand if you want, what's this guy, Schwarzenegger? One Arnold's first vote I've got. You lack enthusiasm. Are you guys just like a little bit in shock that that's the name of the... Kermit? Okay, so Kermit's the overall winner.
Kermit the Frog here. Hi-ho, Kermit the Frog here. Hi-ho, Kermit the... It's the Muppet Show! It's the Muppet Show! It's the Muppet Show! It's the Muppet Show! What seems to be the trouble, Fozzie?
Anyhow, that's all JS. And when it starts out, this is the only HTML. That's it.
So complex.
Amazing. You could do that with just HTML. So I'll put this Wacka President also in our JS folder so you can kind of take a look at it. But, you know, I'm selecting main. That's my first thing. Now I've got a target point. I can start dropping stuff. And then document query selector, I select body also right here. So my body, my main. And then my audio player, create element, audio. So I created an element. And it's HTML5 audio element. I create that. An audio player loop, true. Right? My body, append child. So I'm appending a child, a HTML document child, to my body. And it's the audio player, so I just put that into the DOM. And I create a bunch of variables and have a few functions, you know, and do different stuff. But, you know, it's like var my header equals document create element. And then there's I don't know, there's ways to get rid of them too. Anyhow. All right, so that's kind of like an introduction to JavaScript. Let's talk about Ajax, and then you guys could go. So Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript in XML, though really today we use JSON and not XML because XML sucks.
It's overly complicated.
Yeah, if you just look at XML, that's a more precise answer. It's overly complicated. So here's like a picture of XML. And maybe if we have a XML versus JSON, we'll see a nice.
Well, beyond the XML being really complex, it also has a few extra other features in it for ways to like loop back or include other XML files, which ended up being really insecure. And it just overall ended up being way overcomplicated for its primary purpose was just to mark information about data. So the JSON ended up being a lot simpler. You just put together whatever data you want, almost.
Like the one on the right's way more readable, right? Don't you think so? I think so. All right, so a little definition of Ajax.
So it's barely readable on the projector.
Yeah, I don't know. So it basically allows you to make requests to the server without reloading the page and receive and work with data from the server. So in that Twitter example that I showed you, when somebody's entering a username, it's always making Ajax requests, saying, does this name exist?
Try Google, google.com. When you just start typing before you press enter, it starts doing stuff.
Yeah. It's actually pretty fun at Google to see, like, and this is fun on different people's machines because you get different results because results are person specific. How do I get home? I wonder what Google thinks of me. Get a passport. Well, this guy moves around a lot. Renew my passport. I love the I live. How do I live? How do I cure vampirism, a sore throat, a hangover, a yeast infection, pink eye?
Really?
Wow, they must think that, like,
What do they think?
what kind of person did they profile me as? Somebody else do a how do I cure and see if you got the same answers.
The first one's the mole rat disease.
More.
Oh, I got vampirism, then mole rat disease, sore throat, hangover, yeast infection.
Basically, I think Google thinks I'm a wandering drunk who has too many promiscuous encounters and sucks the blood out of others.
I got all of those except vampirism.
That's funny. Anybody else get vampirism, or is it just...
I got vampirism
Okay.
in Skyrim.
Skyrim, how do you cure?
So not too user specific. But that's Ajax, right? As I continue to type things, it continues to send back possibilities. Obviously pretty cool. And so before we read about it, let's just see it in action. So here we have test HTML. I am a test on test HTML. And on index HTML, let's see what we have. We have a span with an ID, Ajax button, style cursor, pointer. So this is inline CSS. So it's just styling it. And make a request. So when I look at this, I have make a request. And when I go over that, it gives me the finger, the index finger. So Ajax button, make a request. Document query selector, Ajax button, on click, sweet, is equal to function, make request, test HTML. Well, here's a function, make request, pass in test HTML. So this is test HTML, I am a test. And I do HTTP request open, so I open up a request. And it's a GET request, and I pass in the URL where I want to, the thing I want to get. And then HTTP request send. I send that request, and now I need to listen for the response. So I open the request and I send it, listen for the response, right? And I call alert contents function after we receive a server response. So HTTP request on ready state change, alert contents. And then alert contents, what's it do? So if ready state is equal to 4, and there's like these different states that things go through and request responses, and if the status is 200, it's all okay, then I'm going to alert HTTP request response text. So the response that came back from my request, I'm going to pop that up in a little alert. Otherwise, I'm going to say there was a problem with your request. So that's it. That's Ajax.
HTTP request is coming from line 18 there.
Thank you. I didn't say that. New XML. So step 1. Let me add that in. Step 1. New XML HTTP request. Okay, and then that's the HTTP request. Open and send it. Wait for ready state change. Alert contents, just my own name right there. And check those two things, response text. So when we run this page, make a request. I am a test. So I went and got that other document, got the text out of it, put it into that. Sweet. If this was not named correctly, since I'm asking for test, now it's not going to work. There was a problem. Because the thing I was asking for was that test. Right here. JavaScript's kind of funny. I'd kind of think function. I'm setting it equal to a function, and then I'd need to like self-execute that function, but I guess on click it runs that function, and that function calls this function. There's like all these functions. It's function hell in JavaScript, and callbacks, don't like them.
So primary downside to JavaScript is that it's single-threaded. Unlike Java, which is very highly multi-threaded, JavaScript is one thread for your entire web page. So they get around that by using callbacks everywhere. You say, when this happens, call this function. When this happens, call this function. So you're using callbacks everywhere on a JavaScript page to basically register, when this happens, do this. And it semi gets around the single-threaded problem by, since you can just basically register events happening from the user or from across the Ajax requests or whatever, along with code. It's a different way of thinking about coding compared to the more linear ways that we traditionally program on desktop applications.
I haven't run this in a while, so we'll see if it works. Oh, I named it 54. It's the Asian version of James Bond, in case you're wondering. Not sure what I'm showing here.
Is it doing something in the data store?
I'm taking a look here. So index profile.
Get slash profile. Flip, change to
Oh,
slash profile.
/ profile. No, we're there.
All right.
API profile, router,
Go back
index.
to just plain slash then. Now that you've updated.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at this, but apparently this was an Ajax example, which I have not looked through yet. I like the previous one better. Here's the Ajax. New XML HTTP request, get API profile.
Oh, it kept to the profile things even when you went back to just plain slash. It's using the Ajax to refill out the form with your previous values.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we'll come up with some better examples. That's it.
Question?
Yeah, I missed it, but can you go ahead? Can you please run the test example?
Sure.
Again?
Sure.
What the version did?
And talk through it.
Not just seeing it run on like that.
I'm a test. So in index HTML, we said make a request to test HTML. So it makes a request, gets test HTML. The content of that is I'm a test.
So the main reason you would use this, if you remember how easy it was to flip stuff to JSON and back, it's also about that. It's even easier to flip to and from JSON on JavaScript, to go to and from JSON in JavaScript objects. So you can send your request over to the server responds with some JSON data, JavaScript can flip it back into a JavaScript object and do stuff with that data. So I believe in the Twitter example, it's whenever you're typing to create a new account, it's constantly sending in Ajax requests saying, hey, is this username taken or not? And it immediately sends back, is this one taken or not? And that way it can easily, on the web page, as you're typing, let you know if your username has been taken or not without having to reload the entire page.
Yeah, how horrible would that be?
Of course, if you had JavaScript disabled in that case, you would type it in, it wouldn't give you notifications right there, but when you hit submit, it would be able to reload the entire page with the message saying that it was already taken.
Sign up. So where we put in the username, HTML, password, username, input ID, username, the value we'll give to that variable will be username, and placeholder, enter a Twitter name, autocomplete off so it won't drop down suggestions for you. So username, down here we say document query selector username, assign it to JavaScript variable username, and then somewhere in here,
Right there, 26.
new XML HTTP request, open it and go here to check username, and send username.value right? So we're sending it over the value that they've entered. Add event listener, ready state change function, equals 4, and I took out the 200. And item equals XHR response text, so that's the response from the request that we made with Ajax. And console log that item, and if that equals true, username taken, try another name. Otherwise, name.error, text content is nothing. And name.error is document query selector username error, and username error is username error. Where did I put that? I thought it was down at the bottom. Here, I can find it. There, it's right there. Form field for the error. Just a little thing for the error. And so you want to see it run or no? So that is 44, 56.
No 0.
Dang it. Log in, create an account.
We can't see red, so it's hard to see some of the stuff here.
Oh, really? Well, you'll be able to see that. Cowboy, 123, 123. Now you guys know how to get into all my bank accounts. Log out, log in, create an account. Oh, chest 2. COBY. See, I'm not getting drop-down tool hits. Username taken, not taken. And there's a cool thing here in the console. This is where you see your JavaScript stuff, right? But as I type things in, it's sending the request over. You can see cow O B O Y just hit true. All I'm passing back is true or false. Can you see that? Really small down there. You can see it logging it. To live and die in Los Angeles is my username. It's pretty sweet, right? Like just back and forth to the server. Pretty amazing to think about. So super useful. The console is a cool place in JavaScript.
Was it Facebook that had like a fancy introduction message when you went to it on the console?
Really?
You've got the console open, go to Facebook, and
Yeah.
Wow.
Woman surfing with kid on back beats dog at the same time with long paddle. I'm violating copyright law here. It's somebody else's video. And I'm recording. What else is there to show you? Oh, console. So if you just do like things like that, like there's the window and everything is kind of like, I think, that document object model, DOM. If we look at that DOM, we have window, and then under window is document, and then under document is all that other stuff, so window, document. So you could just type in, like at the console, I typed in window, and I'm able to open it, and I'm able to see all this other stuff that's available there. And so that's just an interesting thing. Like this is like all the stuff, and then there's document, right? And so I could look in document and just start looking at all this crazy stuff in here. Anyhow. All right, so I'll work on JavaScript some this weekend and try to get some cleaner pathways for basic intro to JS and and Ajax. And the extra credit is to get that ACL example working and show everybody in the class. Monday I'll give you 100% on 4 assignments if you get that. And or I'll make up 4 absences, give you 100% on 4 absences. And the other extra credit was
The next.
yeah, to do next with Google Cloud Storage, get that working, and 4 absences or 4 homeworks, 100%. And then there'll be some other assignment up there. I think you'll probably have an Ajax assignment.
The Google Cloud Storage thing, photo blog with like everything.
Oh, Photoblog. That'll be enough to keep you busy. So you'll have Photoblog up there. Finish out Photoblog. Have a good weekend, everybody. How you doing, Mike? Good?
Yeah.
How's web programming going? Not the class.